never should have kept it, but something told me the key wanted to be found. My name is Rita Caldwell, and I have worked as a garden keeper at Meadowbrook Memorial Gardens in Portland, Oregon for 11 years. In that time, I have raked countless beds, planted hundreds of memorial roses, and scattered the ashes of more souls than I care to count. The work is peaceful, meditative even. You learn to respect the silence, to move through the garden like you're tending something sacred, because you are. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when I found the key. I remember because Tuesdays are when I rake the rose section, the oldest part of the scattering garden, where the beds run deep and the soil smells like iron and mulch. The air was cool, the kind of cool that makes your breath visible just before sunrise. I had been working for maybe 20 minutes, moving methodically between the memorial plaques, when my rake caught on something solid. At first, I thought it was a rock. We get them sometimes, pushed up by frost or rainfall, but when I knelt down and brushed the soil away, I saw the dull gleam of tarnished brass. The key was small, ornate, with a circular bow and a long shaft that ended in a complicated bit. It looked old, Victorian, maybe. The kind of key you'd see in an antique shop, attached to a velvet ribbon with a little handwritten tag that said, Origin Unknown. I checked my records. The spot where I found it was Plot R47, where we had scattered Mrs. Eleanor Pemberton's ashes 3 weeks prior. I remembered the service, small, quiet, just her daughter and a priest. Mrs. Pemberton had been 91, a retired librarian who requested no flowers, no fuss. Her daughter had cried silently the entire time, clutching a worn leather journal. I slipped the key into my jacket pocket and finished my morning route. Trimmed the hedges along the south fence, deadheaded the chrysanthemums near the fountain, refilled the bird feeders. Normal work, grounding work. But the key felt heavy in my pocket, heavier than brass should feel. That afternoon, Mrs. Pemberton's daughter returned. I saw her walking slowly toward Plot R47, carrying a single white rose. I approached carefully, the way you do when someone is grieving. I'm so sorry for your loss, I said. She looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. Thank you. I just wanted to visit her again, make sure the spot looked peaceful. I hesitated, then I pulled the key from my pocket. I found this morning, right where we scattered your mother's ashes. I thought you might know what it is. Her face went pale. She took the key with trembling fingers, turning it over and over. Oh my God, she whispered. This is, this is the key. The key to my mother's safe deposit box. The one she always told me about but never showed me. She said it held her secrets, letters, photographs, things she couldn't bear to destroy but couldn't bear to share. She looked at me, her eyes wet. I've been looking for this key for months. I tore apart her house. I thought maybe she'd hidden it somewhere or thrown it away before she died. But how did it? I don't know. She closed her fist around it. I buried it with her at the crematory. I slipped it into the chamber before they started. I thought it was the right thing to do. Let her keep her secrets. I felt the air go cold around us. You're sure? Positive. I watched them seal the door. We stood there in silence, both of us staring at the freshly raked soil. No disturbances, no signs of digging, just clean, smooth earth and the small bronze plaque with her mother's name. Maybe it fell out, I offered weakly, during the scattering. She shook her head. Cremated remains don't leave anything behind, certainly not metal. It should have melted or been collected with the ashes. I had no answer for that. She thanked me, her voice barely audible, and walked away, still holding the key. I watched her go, then returned to my work, raked the beds again, smoothed the soil, tried to forget the weight of brass in my hand. But 2 days later, I was raking the rose section again when I felt resistance beneath the tines. I stopped, stared down at the soil, knelt, brushed the dirt aside. The key was back, same spot, same tarnished brass, same impossible presence. I pulled out my phone and called Mrs. Pemberton's daughter. She answered on the second ring. Did you lose the key? I asked. No, she said, confused. It's right here. I'm at the bank now. I'm about to open the box. My hand tightened around the receiver. Then what's in my hand? Silence. What do you mean? I found it again. Same spot, same key. I heard her breath catch. Then quietly, that's impossible. I know. She hung up. I stood there in the garden, holding the key, feeling the morning sun on my face and the cold brass burning against my palm. Around me, the roses swayed in a wind I couldn't feel. The soil beneath plot R47 looked freshly disturbed, even though I had just raked it smooth. I never gave the key back. I tried once, left it on the memorial plaque overnight, but by morning it was in my jacket pocket again. I don't know how. I don't know why. Mrs. Pemberton's daughter never returned to the garden. I heard later that the safe deposit box was empty, just a velvet lining and the faint smell of old paper. I still carry the key. 11 years of tending graves, and I thought I understood how death worked. You scatter the ashes, you plant the flowers, you move on. But some things refuse to stay buried. Some secrets claw their way back to the surface, no matter how deep you rake the soil. I check plot R47 every morning now. The soil is always disturbed, always freshly turned, as if something beneath is still searching, still reaching. And the key stays warm in my pocket, even in winter. I should have stopped measuring them, but I needed to understand why they kept growing closer. My name is Saul Finch, and I have worked as a groundskeeper at Riverside Memorial Park in Sacramento, California, for 16 years. The work is methodical, predictable. You mow in straight lines, you trim the hedges on Thursdays, you water the scattering gardens before dawn. The rhythm keeps you sane. The routine keeps you from thinking too much about what you're walking over. The lilies started appearing in early April, just after we scattered Mr. Takeshi Tanaka's ashes in the eastern garden. I noticed them on a Friday morning during my usual inspection round. A perfect circle of white lilies, maybe 6 feet in diameter, arranged around plot E31, where Mr. Tanaka's memorial plaque sat flush with the grass. I stopped and stared. We hadn't planted any bulbs in that section. The scattering garden was deliberately kept minimal: native grasses, a few memorial benches, bronze plaques set into stone borders. No flowers, that was the whole point. Low maintenance, natural. I checked my records that afternoon. Mr. Tanaka's service had been small. His widow, two adult children, a minister. The request form clearly stated, no flowers, per deceased's wishes. I made a note to remove the lilies over the weekend, but when I returned on Monday, there were more. The circle had tightened, now maybe 5 feet across. The white blooms clustered more densely. I counted them. 47 flowers, each one perfect, each one oriented toward the center where the plaque lay. I pulled them out myself, all of them, dug down 6 inches to make sure I got the bulbs, raked the soil smooth, reseeded the bare patches with fescue. By Wednesday, they were back. This time, the circle was 4 feet wide, 63 flowers. I began pulling them every morning before the families arrived for services. It became part of my routine. Mow the lawn, trim the roses, pull the impossible lilies from plot E31. I didn't tell anyone, didn't write it in the log. I just removed them and moved on. But the circle kept shrinking. Every few days, tighter, every week, more flowers. 3 feet, 81 lilies, 2 feet, 112. I stopped counting after that. Started bringing a bucket and gloves, hauling out armfuls of white petals and green stems that smelled like funeral parlors and something else underneath. Something mineral, like wet stone. It was late June when I first heard the humming. I had arrived just after sunrise to pull the latest bloom. The circle was tight now, maybe 18 inches across, a dense ring of white surrounding the memorial plaque like a wreath. I knelt down with my trowel, reaching for the first stem when I heard it. A woman's voice, soft, melodic, humming a tune I almost recognized. I looked around. The garden was empty. The parking lot vacant except for my truck. The sound was coming from the ground, from the flowers. I pressed my ear to the soil. The humming grew louder, clearer. It was a Japanese melody, slow and mournful, the kind of song you might hear at a funeral or a remembrance ceremony. I didn't know the words, but I felt them in my chest, felt the grief and longing woven into every note. I pulled back, breathing hard. The flowers swayed in a breeze I couldn't feel. The humming continued, soft and constant, rising from the earth like something buried too shallow. That night, I did something I hadn't done in all my years at Riverside. I called Mr. Tanaka's widow. Her daughter answered. I explained who I was, stumbled through an apology for bothering them, then asked if her mother ever sang at the scattering service. There was a long pause. Then, yes, she sang an old lullaby, something my father used to hum when they were first married. Why? I didn't know what to say. I told her I thought I'd heard it on the wind, that the garden sometimes carried sounds in strange ways. She thanked me quietly and hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I kept hearing the melody in my head, looping endlessly, the same mournful phrase over and over. By mid-July, The circle was less than a foot wide. The lilies had become a dense spiral now, curling inward toward the plaque in a pattern that looked almost deliberate, mathematical. I started measuring them with a tape measure, documenting the spiral's tightness, the spacing between blooms. The numbers made no sense. Perfect intervals, perfect curves, and every morning the humming grew louder. I began arriving earlier, before the sun broke the horizon, just to hear it clearly. The voice was always the same, always that lullaby. Sometimes I would sit on the memorial bench 20 feet away and just listen, letting the sound wash over me like water. It wasn't frightening anymore. It was sad, deeply, impossibly sad. In August, Mrs. Tanaka returned to the garden. I saw her walking slowly toward Plot E31, carrying a small bouquet of white chrysanthemums. I almost stopped her, almost warned her about the lilies and the humming and the spiral that had no explanation. But I didn't. I watched from a distance as she knelt beside the plaque. She placed the chrysanthemums down gently, then bowed her head. And then, so quietly I almost missed it, she began to hum. The same melody, the same lullaby. The lilies around her swayed in unison. The spiral tightened, just slightly, the flowers leaning inward as if listening. I felt my throat tighten, felt something in my chest crack open. Mrs. Tanaka stayed for maybe 10 minutes. When she stood, she looked directly at me. Our eyes met across the garden. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just bowed once, deeply, and walked away. I approached Plot E31 slowly. The lilies were still there, but the spiral had changed. It no longer curved inward. Now it opened outward, the flowers spreading like a releasing hand. The humming stopped that day. I haven't heard it since, but the lilies remain. I stopped pulling them weeks ago. The spiral holds at 3 feet now, perfect and white and impossibly alive. Families visit and ask me what kind they are, how we keep them so pristine. I tell them I don't know, that they simply grow here. Every morning, I walk past Plot E31 and check the pattern. The spiral stays constant. The flowers never wilt. And sometimes, in the early hours before dawn, I sit on the memorial bench and listen to the silence where the humming used to be. I thought I understood grief, thought I knew how it worked. You bury it, you scatter it, you let the earth take it back. But some things refuse to stay silent. Some things bloom in the dark, reaching for a voice that sang them into being. And some mornings, when the wind is right, I swear I can still hear her humming. I buried it 7 times, and 7 times it came back. My name is Lena Ortiz, and I have served as director of Greenfield Cemetery and Memorial Gardens in Charleston, South Carolina for 19 years. The position requires precision, empathy, and an unwavering respect for the dead. You learn to anticipate family needs, to manage logistics with grace, to prepare burial sites with reverence. Everything has its place. Everything follows order. Until the shoe appeared, it was early March when we began preparing a new scattering bed in Section C, the oldest part of the cemetery. The section dated back to the 1800s. though most of the original headstones had long since crumbled or been relocated. We were expanding the memorial garden to accommodate the growing preference for cremation, turning a forgotten corner of the property into something peaceful, something useful. I was supervising the groundwork myself, watching our excavator carefully remove the topsoil when I saw something dark in the dirt. I raised my hand. The machine stopped. I climbed down into the shallow trench and knelt. The object was half buried, caked in clay and mud. I brushed it clean carefully, the way you would handle something fragile. It was a child's shoe, a Mary Jane, black leather, with a small brass buckle. Size 2, maybe. The kind of shoe you'd see in old photographs, worn by little girls in Sunday dresses. I turned it over in my hands. The leather was intact, barely degraded despite what must have been decades underground. The sole showed wear, scuff marks on the toe. Someone had walked in this shoe, once small. I checked the cemetery records that afternoon, cross-referencing Section C burials against our archive maps. No children were listed. The section had been reserved for adults, mostly Confederate soldiers and their families, a few as yellow fever victims from the 1870s, but no child burials, not in over a century. I placed the shoe in a small box and left it in my office, intending to catalog it as a historical artifact, maybe donate it to the local museum. The excavation continued the next morning. We laid the irrigation lines, spread the topsoil, planted the native grasses. The bed was ready by Thursday. I did a final inspection before approving it for use. The shoe was sitting in the center of the freshly prepared plot. I stopped walking, stared at it. The same black Mary Jane sitting upright on the grass, as if placed there deliberately. I looked back at my office window, 100 yards away. The box was still on my desk. I could see it through the glass. But the shoe was here. I picked it up slowly, feeling the cold leather against my palm. It was identical, same scuffs, same brass buckle, same size. I carried it back to my office and placed it next to the first shoe. 2 shoes now, a matching pair. I locked my office door that night, double-checked the windows. When I returned Friday morning, both shoes were gone. I searched the office, checked the trash, questioned the night staff. Nothing. The shoes had vanished. Until I walked past Section C. The shoe was back. Just one this time, sitting in the exact same spot. Center of the new scattering bed, upright, waiting. I tried to remove it again, placed it in a sealed plastic bag, locked it in my desk drawer. By Monday, it was back in the plot. I buried it 6 inches down, covered it with soil and sod. Tuesday morning, it sat on the surface, clean and dry. I buried it deeper. 12 inches, 18, 2 feet. It always came back. By the second week, I stopped trying to remove it, stopped questioning the logic. I simply reburied it each morning and moved on with my work. Conducted services, met with families, approved burial permits. The routine kept me grounded, but I started noticing other things. The grass around the shoe wouldn't grow. We reseeded 3 times, used fertilizer, adjusted the irrigation. The soil remained bare in a perfect circle, maybe 2 feet wide, as if something beneath refused to let anything take root. And at night, when I locked up the office, I could see the shoe from the parking lot. It seemed to glow faintly in the dark, catching moonlight in a way leather shouldn't. On the 8th day, I gave up. I walked to Section C before sunrise, knelt beside the shoe, and spoke aloud. I don't know who you belonged to, I said quietly. I don't know why you're here, but I'll leave you alone. I promise. I stood and walked back to the office. I didn't look back. That morning, I approved the first scattering service for the new bed. A retired teacher, age 74, requested a simple ceremony, family only, no frills. I watched from a distance as they gathered around the plot. The minister spoke. The family cried softly. The ashes were scattered across the grass, carefully, reverently. The shoe sat undisturbed at the edge of the circle. No one seemed to notice it. After the service ended, I approached the plot to inspect the area. The shoe was gone. I searched the grass, checked beneath the memorial bench, scanned the entire section. Nothing. I felt relief and unease in equal measure. Maybe it had finally found peace. Maybe whoever it belonged to had moved on. But that night, I dreamed of a little girl in a black dress and a single shoe standing at the edge of Section C, looking for something she'd lost. She didn't speak, didn't cry, just stood there, waiting. I woke up sweating, my heart pounding. I drove to the cemetery at 3 in the morning, unlocked the gates, and walked to Section C with a flashlight. The shoe was back. Same spot, same position. But now there was something else. A small handprint in the dirt beside it. Child-sized, pressed deep into the soil as if someone had knelt there recently. I knelt beside the print, placed my hand next to it for scale. My fingers dwarfed it. I touched the impression gently, feeling the cold earth. The handprint was fresh. I never told anyone about the shoe. I stopped trying to remove it, stopped questioning why it remained. I simply acknowledged its presence, the way you acknowledge a grave marker or a memorial plaque. It became part of Section C, part of the landscape. Families scatter their loved ones around it now. The grass grows everywhere except that small circle where the shoe sits. I've stopped scheduling maintenance there, stopped trying to explain. Some things can't be buried. Some things refuse to let go. And some losses are so profound they leave marks in the earth that never fade. I still see the shoe every morning, still feel the weight of that small handprint in my chest. And sometimes, when I lock up at night, I swear I see a shadow near Section C small, patient, waiting for someone to notice. I notice, but I don't know what to do except let it stay. The stone shouldn't have been there, but the word carved into it made perfect sense. My name is Omar Hassan, and I have worked as a caretaker at Willow Ridge Memorial Park in Tacoma, Washington, for 22 years. The job demands physical labor and quiet attention. You rake the paths, tend the flower beds, maintain the scattering gardens with a precision that honors the dead. You learn to move through the space like you're walking through a library, softly, respectfully. Plot 14B had been routine, a veteran's scattering, completed 4 months prior. Sergeant First Class David Moreau, Army, 76 years old. The service had been military precise, flag folding, rifle salute, taps played on a distant hill. His ashes were scattered beneath the dogwood tree at the plot's center, and his widow had placed a small bronze marker into the soil with his name and rank. I was preparing the adjacent plot that morning, raking the soil smooth for a service scheduled later that week, when my rake struck something solid. The impact jarred my wrists. Metal on stone. I stopped, set the rake aside, and knelt. The soil was soft, freshly turned from recent rain. I dug carefully with my hands, feeling for the obstruction. My fingers found it quickly, smooth, round, heavy. I pulled it free and sat back on my heels. It was a river stone, perfectly worn, the kind shaped by decades of water flow, maybe 6 inches across, gray with mineral veins running through it like scars. The weight surprised me. It felt denser than it should, like it carried more than just mass. But what stopped my breath was the carving. A single word etched deep into the stone's surface in rough, deliberate letters: home. I turned it over in my hands. The back was smooth, unmarked. Just the word on one side, carved with something sharp and patient. I checked my work chart. Plot 14 was the only recent scattering in this section. I pulled out my phone and searched for Sergeant Moreau's service details in our digital records. The report was brief: military honors, widow, and 2 daughters present. Ashes scattered per request. Notes section mentioned the deceased had served 2 tours overseas, died of complications from pneumonia, standard funeral logistics. But there was an addendum I'd missed before, added by the funeral director who handled the transport. Remains recovered from overseas incident, repatriated 2019, delayed service per family request. I called the director's number. He answered on the third ring. Omar, what's going on? I found something in plot 14B, a stone. It has a word carved into it. Silence. Then, what word? Home. I heard him exhale slowly. Jesus, where was it buried? Right where we scattered Sergeant Moreau's ashes, but it's too large to have been missed during prep. I would have seen it when I laid the irrigation lines. What kind of stone? River stone, worn smooth, like it's been in water for years. Another pause. I need to tell you something. The family didn't share this publicly, but Sergeant Moreau's death wasn't recent. He drowned during a training exercise in 2003, overseas. His body wasn't recovered for 16 years. They finally found him in 2019, washed up on a riverbank 200 miles from where he went missing. I felt the stone grow cold in my hands. They scattered his ashes 4 months ago. Yes, the widow wanted to wait, needed time to process. She kept his ashes at home for months before deciding on Willow Ridge. I stared down at the stone. This wasn't here when I prepared the plot. I'm certain. I believe you, but I don't have an explanation. Neither did I. I reburied the stone that afternoon, placed it back where I'd found it, covered it with soil, raked the surface smooth. I told myself it was a family offering, something placed during a private visit, that someone had returned to leave a marker, but the weight of it stayed with me, the way it felt too dense, too deliberate, the way the word seemed carved by someone who needed to say it, needed to leave it behind. 2 days later, I was mowing the eastern section when I saw Mrs. Moreau walking slowly toward Plot 14B. I shut off the mower and approached carefully. Mrs. Moreau, can I help you with anything? She looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. I just wanted to visit, see how the dogwood is doing. It's thriving. Your husband's spot is beautiful. She nodded, her eyes distant. He loved rivers, always talked about retiring near one, building a small cabin, fishing every morning. She paused. He never got the chance. I hesitated. Ma'am, did you or your daughters leave anything at the plot recently? A stone, maybe? Her expression shifted. Confusion, then something else. Recognition. A stone? Yes, a river stone, with a word carved into it. She went very still. What word? Home. I watched her face crumble. She pressed her hand to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. I stepped closer, uncertain, but she waved me back gently. I'm okay, she whispered. I need to see it. We walked to Plot 14B together. I knelt and dug carefully, my hands finding the stone exactly where I'd left it. I pulled it free and handed it to her. She held it like something sacred, traced the letters with her fingertips. Tears ran down her face. He used to carry a stone like this, she said quietly. Found it in a river near our first apartment. Kept it in his pocket for years. Said it reminded him of home. She looked at me. When they recovered his body, there was nothing with him, no personal effects, just his tags. You didn't place this here? No, neither did my daughters. We scattered his ashes and left. We haven't been back until today. We sat in silence beside the dogwood tree, the stone headed in her lap, catching sunlight. Around us, the garden was still, no wind, no bird song, just the quiet weight of something unresolved settling into place. Mrs. Moreau stayed for an hour. When she finally stood, she placed the stone back into the soil herself, patting the earth gently around it. Let it stay, she said. I think he meant for it to be here. I nodded. I'll make sure no one disturbs it. She thanked me and walked away slowly, her hand trailing along the dogwood's low branches. I've tended Plot 14B every week since. The stone stays buried, undisturbed beneath the soil. I don't dig it up anymore, don't question its presence. But sometimes, when I'm raking the paths in early morning, I feel the weight of it beneath the earth. Feel the way it anchors the plot, holding something in place that traveled too far and too long to find its way back. 22 years I've worked here, and I thought I understood what burial meant. You place the dead where they belong, mark the spot, move on. But some journeys don't end with scattering. Some souls carry pieces of home with them, worn smooth by time and distance, carved with a single word that says everything. I think about Sergeant Moreau sometimes, about the 16 years he spent in a river, searching, about the stone he carried, and the stone that found its way here. And I wonder if home is a place you return to, or a place that finds you when you've been lost too long. The stone stays buried. The dogwood blooms every spring, and the soil above plot 14B feels heavier than it should, like it's holding more than ash. It's holding a promise kept. The petals kept appearing even after I stopped planting the roses. My name is Claire Donovan, and I have worked as a garden attendant at Maplewood Cemetery in Burlington, Vermont for 13 years. My job is simple, repetitive, and quietly sacred. I plant memorial flowers, maintain the scattering gardens, and ensure every plot looks cared for. Families trust me with their grief. I take that seriously. The rose petals started appearing in late May, just after we scattered Ms. Eleanor Voss's ashes near the memorial bench in Section G. I noticed them during my morning rounds, small piles of deep red petals arranged at the bench's base. 7 petals in each pile, always 7. At first, I assumed a family member had visited. Ms. Voss had been a florist, beloved in the community, and her service had drawn over 100 mourners. It made sense that someone would leave flowers. But when I checked the security logs, there were no recorded visitors during the hours when the petals appeared. The camera covering Section G showed empty pathways, undisturbed grass, and the bench sitting alone in the early morning light. I collected the petals that first week, placing them in small compost bins behind the maintenance shed. By Friday, I had gathered 35 petals, 5 piles of 7. The following Monday, the piles returned. Same location, same count, 7 petals each, arranged in perfect circles at the bench's 4 legs and 1 pile directly in front of the seat. I counted them carefully. 35 again. I called Ms. Voss's daughter that afternoon. Ms. Chen, this is Claire from Maplewood. I wanted to ask if you or any family members have been leaving rose petals at your mother's memorial. There was a brief pause. Rose petals? No, we haven't visited since the service. Why? I explained what I'd been finding, the piles, the count, the security footage showing no visitors. She went quiet. Then, softly, my mother always gave bouquets in sets of 7. She said it was the perfect number, balanced, meaningful. She never explained why, but every arrangement she made had 7 flowers. Did she have a favorite rose? Red, always red. She grew them in her greenhouse. I thanked her and hung up, staring at the small pile of petals I'd collected that morning. They were fresh, vibrant, still holding their color, not wilted or dried, as if they'd been plucked moments before I found them. I stopped removing them after that. Let them accumulate at the base of the bench. By the end of the second week, there were 10 piles, 70 petals total. By the third week, 15 piles, and they appeared every single night. I began arriving earlier, hoping to catch whoever was leaving them. 4:30 in the morning, just as the sky turned gray. I parked my truck at the edge of Section G and watched the bench through binoculars. Nothing, no movement, no visitors, just the empty garden and the morning mist rolling across the grass. But when I walked to the bench at sunrise, the petals were there, fresh piles, perfectly arranged. I stopped planting those anywhere in the cemetery, removed every bush, every memorial planting, every decorative rose bed. I wanted to eliminate any possible source. The petals kept appearing. I tested them, sent samples to a local botanist who confirmed they were genuine rose petals, Rosa Crimson Glory, a classic hybrid tea variety, the same type Ms. Voss had grown in her greenhouse. Where did you get these? The botanist asked. They appeared at a memorial site. Appeared? Yes. She looked at me for a long moment. These petals are fresh, maybe a day old. If you're finding them consistently, someone is cutting them from a living plant. But there were no rose plants left at Maplewood. I'd removed them all. In mid-June, I decided to spend the night at the cemetery. I brought a thermos of coffee, a flashlight, and a folding chair. I positioned myself 30 feet from the bench, hidden behind a cluster of birch trees. The sun set slowly. The garden grew dark. I waited. At 2:13 in the morning, I heard something, a soft rustling, like fabric brushing against grass. I turned on my flashlight and aimed it at the bench. Nothing. But when I approached, there were new petals, 7 of them, arranged in a perfect circle where the beam of my flashlight had just been. I knelt down, my hands shaking. The petals were warm. I touched one gently, felt the velvety texture, the faint dampness of something freshly cut. Ms. Voss, I whispered. The air went still. No breeze, no sound, just the heavy silence of a cemetery at night. I stayed until dawn. The petals remained. No new ones appeared while I watched. It was as if the presence, whatever it was, only worked when I wasn't looking directly. By July, I had stopped trying to understand it. The petals became part of my routine. I'd arrive each morning, count the new piles, note their placement in my log. Sometimes there were 5, sometimes 10, always in multiples of 7. Families began to notice. Visitors would ask about the roses, comment on how lovely the memorial looked. I didn't correct them, didn't explain that no one was planting them. Ms. Chen returned in August. I saw her walking slowly toward the bench, carrying a small bouquet of white lilies. I intercepted her gently. I wanted to show you something, I said. I led her to the bench. The petals were there, 42 of them arranged in 6 perfect circles. She stared at them for a long time, then knelt down and touched one. She's here, she whispered. I think so. She always said flukers were her way of speaking when words weren't enough. Every bouquet told a story. She looked up at me, her eyes wet. 7 flowers meant I'm still here, I'm watching, I haven't forgotten. I felt my throat tighten. Miss. Chen stayed for an hour, sitting on the bench, surrounded by the petals her mother had somehow left behind. When she stood to leave, she placed her white lilies beside the red petals. Thank you for taking care of her, she said. I haven't done anything. You've been paying attention. That's everything. I still find the petals every morning. They appear in sets of 7, arranged with a precision I could never replicate. I've stopped questioning the logistics, stopped trying to solve the mystery. Some things don't need explanations. Some gestures of love transcend logic. I tend Section G with extra care now. Trim the grass around the bench, keep the pathways clear, replace the memorial plaque when it tarnishes. And every morning I count the petals and note their placement. 13 years I've worked here, and I thought I understood what memorials were for. Markers, remembrances, places to leave flowers and move on. But some souls leave their own flowers. Some love continues arranging itself in perfect numbers, speaking in a language only grief understands. The petals still appear. I've stopped removing them. They accumulate at the base of the bench like offerings, like prayers, like something that refuses to be forgotten. And on quiet mornings, when the mist hangs low over Section G, I swear I can smell roses blooming where no roses grow. Ms. Voss is still here, still tending her garden, still giving bouquets in sets of 7, and I've learned to let her. I watched the soil breathe for 20 minutes before I understood what I was seeing. My name is Vincent Carver, and I have worked as maintenance lead at Oakmont Memorial Gardens in Ann Arbor, Michigan for 17 years. The position requires vigilance across all seasons: summer heat, autumn leaves, winter ice, spring mud. You learn to read the landscape, to anticipate problems before they emerge. The work is predictable, seasonal until it isn't. The first frost came early that year, mid-November, coating the scattering gardens in a thin layer of crystalline white. I arrived before dawn to inspect the irrigation lines, checking for freeze damage before the temperature dropped further. The air was sharp and still, the kind of cold that makes your breath hang visible in front of your face. I was walking through Section D when I noticed the condensation, small clouds rising rhythmically from the soil. I stopped and stared. At first, I thought it was ground heat escaping, a natural phenomenon where warmer earth meets freezing air. But the pattern was wrong, too regular, too deliberate. I knelt beside plot D23 and watched. The clouds appeared every few seconds, small puffs of vapor rising about 6 inches before dissipating, like breath, like something beneath the surface was exhaling. I checked my records on my phone. Plot D23 belonged to Marcus Trent, age 34, scattered 3 months prior. The notes were sparse. No service, no family present. Just a quiet scattering performed by our staff. Cause of death listed as cardiac arrest during a marathon. Sudden collapse, mile 19. I placed my hand on the soil. It was cold. No warmth radiating from below. Nothing that would explain the condensation. But the breathing continued. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The vapor clouds appeared in perfect intervals, every 7 seconds, like clockwork. I counted, timed them, 40 breaths over 5 minutes before I stopped filming. The sun was rising now, pale light spreading across the garden. I stood and backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the plot. As the temperature climbed, the condensation faded. By the time full daylight arrived, it had stopped completely. I told myself it was atmospheric, a quirk of humidity and temperature, something explainable. But I returned the next morning. Same time, same frost, the breathing was back. This time I brought a thermometer and a moisture meter. I tested the soil temperature, 31 degrees, identical to the surrounding plots. Moisture content normal. No heat source, no water vapor, nothing that should produce visible condensation. Yet the clouds kept rising, every 7 seconds, rhythmic, steady. I watched for 20 minutes, timing each breath, noting the exact intervals. At minute 19, something changed. The rhythm slowed. Instead of 7 seconds, the interval stretched to 10, then 12, then 15. The vapor clouds grew fainter, smaller, as if whatever was producing them was weakening. At minute 20, they stopped. I stood in the frozen garden, my own breath clouding the air, and felt something heavy settle in my chest. The silence was absolute. No birds, no wind, just the empty plot and the morning frost melting slowly in the rising sun. I didn't tell anyone, not the director, not the groundskeeping staff. I just marked it in my personal log and moved on. But the next morning, I couldn't stay away. Same time, same frost. The breathing had returned, reset to its original rhythm. Every 7 seconds, perfectly timed, I began arriving early every frost morning that winter. November, December, January, every time the temperature dropped below freezing, I walked to plot D23 and watched. The pattern never varied. 40 breaths, 19 minutes, then the slowing, the weakening, the stop. I researched Marcus Trent during my lunch breaks, found his marathon results online, read the news coverage of his death. He'd been a dedicated runner, training for Boston. No prior health conditions. The cardiac arrest had been sudden, unexpected. He collapsed at mile 19 and never regained consciousness. Mile 19, 19 minutes. The connection felt too precise to be coincidence. In late January, I brought a folding chair and a thermos of coffee. I sat beside plot D, 23 in the pre-dawn dark, and waited for the frost. When it came, I spoke aloud. "I don't know if you can hear me," I said quietly, "but I've been watching. I've been counting." The vapor clouds continued, every 7 seconds, steady, persistent. "You made it to mile 19, I continued. "That's farther than most people ever run." The breathing didn't change. I hadn't expected it to, but at minute 19, when the rhythm began to slow, I stood and placed my hand on the frozen soil. "You can rest now," I whispered. The vapor clouds faded, slowed, stopped. I sat back down and waited, but they didn't return. Not that morning, not the next frost, not all winter. In March, when the ground thawed, I planted a small marker stone near plot D23. Nothing official, nothing that would violate cemetery policy. Just a smooth river rock with the number 19 painted in white. A woman visited in April. I saw her walking slowly towards Section D, carrying a single blue ribbon, the kind they give finishers at marathons. She stopped at plot D23, knelt down, and tied the ribbon around the marker stone. I approached carefully. "Excuse me, ma'am. Did you know Mr. Trent?" She looked up, surprised. "I'm his sister. I didn't know anyone had left a marker. I maintained this section. I noticed." I paused, uncertain how to explain. "I noticed something unusual about this plot during the winter." "Unusual how?" I chose my words carefully. On frost mornings, there was condensation rising from the soil. It looked like breathing. Her face went pale. Breathing? Yes, every 7 seconds, for 19 minutes, then it would stop. She pressed her hand to her mouth. He used to do breathing exercises before races, 7-second intervals. Inhale, exhale, pace yourself. She wiped her eyes. And 19 miles, that's where I know. We sat together in silence. The spring air was warm, the frost season long past. The soil beneath plot D23 looked like every other plot. Grass growing, flowers blooming, nothing unusual. Thank you for noticing, she said finally. Thank you for paying attention. I couldn't stop watching. She smiled faintly. That sounds like Marcus. He never stopped moving, never stopped pushing. She touched the ribbon gently. Maybe he just needed to finish the race. I've maintained plot D23 with extra care since that conversation. Keep the grass trimmed, the marker stone clean, the flowers watered, and every winter, on the first frost morning, I walk to section D before dawn. The breathing hasn't returned. The soil stays silent, frozen and still, like every other plot. But I still count to 19, still time 7-second intervals, still remember the rhythm of something that refused to stop, even after the heart failed. 17 years I've worked here, and I thought I understood how death worked. The body stops. The breathing ends. You scatter the ashes and move on. But some rhythms persist. Some patterns continue in the space between visible and invisible, in the frost and the breath and the counting. I don't know if Marcus Trent finished his race. Don't know if those 19 minutes meant completion or continuation. I only know that for one winter, the earth remembered the pace, the breathing, the exact moment when everything stopped. And on the coldest mornings, when my own breath clouds the air, I think about endurance, about the distance between starting and finishing, about the way some things keep running long after they should have stopped. Plot D23 stays quiet now, but I still avoid it in winter, still count my steps when I walk past, still feel the weight of those 19 minutes settling in my chest like frost that never fully melts. Some distances can't be measured in miles. Some races continue in ways we can't see. And some mornings, I swear the soil still remembers how to breathe. The nameplate belonged to someone who didn't exist until she walked through my door. My name is Janine Porter, and I have worked as records keeper at Hillside Gardens Cemetery in Portland, Maine for 14 years. My job is documentation, updating burial maps, maintaining digital archives, ensuring every name matches every plot. The work requires precision. One wrong entry, one misplaced file, and families lose their history. I take that responsibility seriously. I found the nameplate in early October while updating the garden map for our quarterly review. I was walking the pathways with my tablet, cross-referencing plot numbers against our database, when I saw something metallic half buried in the gravel near Section F. I knelt down and brushed the dirt away. It was a small brass nameplate, weathered and tarnished, about 4 inches long. engraved in careful script, Constance Wright, beloved, 1934 to 2007. I stood slowly, turning it over in my hands. The engraving was professional, the kind we used for memorial markers, but the name meant nothing to me. Back in my office, I searched our database. No Constance Wright. I checked the physical archives, pulling files from 2007, scanning through burial permits and scattering authorizations. Nothing. I expanded my search, checked neighboring cemeteries, online obituaries, state death records. Constance Wright appeared nowhere in Maine's funeral system for that year. No burial, no cremation, no record of death. I placed the nameplate in a plastic bag and filed it under unknown items. Probably a mistake, I told myself. Maybe a family had ordered it for a different cemetery and dropped it here by accident. But it bothered me. The engraving was too deliberate, too personal. Beloved wasn't generic funeral language. Someone had chosen that word specifically. A week passed. I forgot about the nameplate, buried myself in routine work, updating spreadsheets, filing permits, responding to family inquiries. Then the woman arrived. It was a gray Tuesday afternoon when she walked into my office, elderly, maybe 75, wearing a long wool coat and carrying a worn leather purse. Her face was kind, but tired, lined with the kind of grief that's settled into permanence. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I'm looking for my grandmother's scattering site." I smiled professionally. "Of course, what's the name?" "Constance Wright." My hands froze on the keyboard. I looked up slowly. "Could you spell that?" "Constance. Wright. Wright. I felt my throat tighten. When was she scattered here? Oh, it would have been years ago. 1973, I believe. My family had her scattered under a different name. She'd been living with an assumed identity for decades. We only recently found documentation that connected her back to her birth name. And her birth name was Constance Wright? Yes, Constance Elizabeth Wright, born 1934, died 2007. The dates matched perfectly. I pulled the nameplate from my desk drawer, my hands shaking slightly. "Did your family leave a memorial marker here?" "No. We were never sure exactly where she was scattered. The records were vague, and we didn't want to disturb." She stopped, staring at the nameplate in my hands. "Where did you get that?" "I found it a week ago, half buried in the pathway near Section F." She reached for it slowly, her fingers trembling. "This is her. This is my grandmother's name." She looked up at me, her eyes wet. "How is this possible?" I had no answer. I pulled up my database, searched again under every variation of the name. Nothing. "Ma'am, I need to be honest with you. We have no record of a Constance Wright at this cemetery. If she was scattered here under a different name, I'll need that information to locate the plot." "Margaret Foster. That's the name she used. Married name." I typed it in. The search returned immediately. "Margaret Foster, scattered June 1973, Section F, Plot 11. The woman exhaled shakily. "That's her." "But the nameplate?" "I don't know. We never made one. My mother died before we found Constance's real identity, and I only learned about it last year through genealogy research." She held the nameplate carefully, as if it might crumble. No one living knew to make this. We walked to Section F together. Plot 11 was near the pathway, marked with a small stone that read Margaret Foster, beloved wife, 1934 to 2007. The dates matched the nameplate exactly. The woman knelt beside the marker, placed the brass nameplate on the grass, and wept quietly. I stood a respectful distance away, my mind cycling through explanations and finding none that held. Someone had engraved that nameplate. Someone who knew Constance Wright's real name, her real dates. Someone who knew she was buried here under an alias. But according to the woman, no one living had that information until recently. She wanted to be remembered, the woman said finally, her voice barely audible. Under her real name, she told my mother once near the end that she was tired of pretending, tired of being Margaret. She touched the nameplate gently. Maybe she found a way. I helped her stand. We walked back to the office in silence. Before she left, she asked if she could keep the nameplate. Of course, I said. Will you update your records? Add her real name? I can make a note, create a cross reference, but officially, she's listed as Margaret Foster. I understand. She held the nameplate close. Thank you for finding this. Thank you for noticing. After she left, I returned to my desk and stared at my computer screen. I created a new entry linking Constance Wright to Margaret Foster, added the dates, marked the connection in the database. But my hands kept shaking. That night, I drove back to the cemetery. I don't know why, some compulsion I couldn't name. I walked to Section F with my flashlight, following the gravel pathway to Plot 11. The nameplate was gone. The woman had taken it, I reminded myself. Of course it was gone, but there, in the grass beside the stone marker, was a fresh indentation, the exact size and shape of the brass nameplate, as if it had been pressed into the soil, held there for days before I found it. I knelt down and touched the impression. The grass was flattened, the dirt beneath compacted. Not recent. Old. Weeks old. Maybe longer. The nameplate I'd found had been half buried in the pathway, 20 feet from this spot. I stood and looked around the empty garden. The October wind moved through the trees. Leaves scattered across the pathways. The cemetery was silent, except for the rustle of branches and the distant sound of traffic. Constance, I whispered, is that what you wanted? To be remembered? No answer. Just the wind and the darkness and the weight of a name that existed nowhere except on a piece of brass that appeared from nothing. I updated the plot marker the following week, added a small plaque beneath Margaret Foster's stone, also known as Constance Elizabeth Wright, born 1934. Families visit now, descendants who found the connection through genealogy sites. They leave flowers. They take photographs. They speak both names aloud. And sometimes, when I walk through Section F during my rounds, I find small objects near Plot 11. A coin, a ribbon, a smooth stone, items that weren't there the day before, items no one remembers leaving. I collect them carefully, document them, place them in a box labeled Plot 11 Offerings. The box is nearly full now. 14 years I've worked here, and I thought I understood records. names and dates and documentation, paper trails that prove existence, but some identities refuse to be erased. Some names carve themselves into brass and bury themselves in pathways, waiting for someone to notice. I think about Constance often, about the decades she spent being someone else, the weight of a false name, the longing to be known. And I wonder if the nameplate was a gift or a message, a memorial or a plea. The documentation says Margaret Foster, the brass says Constance Wright, and somewhere between the two, a woman finally got to decide who she was. I keep searching the pathways now, looking for other nameplates, other identities waiting to surface. Because if one appeared, there might be more names, more stories, more souls who need someone to notice. And I've learned to pay attention. The voice came from the earth itself, and it sang the same aria every morning. My name is Mateo Ruiz, and I have worked as a landscaper at Serenity Grove Memorial Park in Santa Fe, New Mexico for 9 years. The job is physical, meditative, edging garden beds, trimming hedges, maintaining the beauty that families expect when they visit. You learn to work quietly, to respect the space. The dead deserve careful attention. I first heard the singing in late July while edging the rose beds near Section H. The morning was already hot, the sun climbing fast above the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. I was working methodically, the trimmer's motor drowning out most ambient sound when I shut it off to adjust the blade guard. That's when I heard her. A woman's voice, operatic and clear, singing in Italian. The sound seemed to rise from the soil itself, from the freshly edged border where grass met garden bed. I stood very still, listening. The aria was mournful, sustained notes that climbed and fell with trained precision. Professional, beautiful, impossible. I looked around. The garden was empty. No visitors, no maintenance staff. Just me and the morning heat, and a voice that had no source. I knelt beside the garden bed and pressed my ear to the soil. The singing grew louder, clearer. It was coming from beneath the ground, from somewhere deep in the earth where sound shouldn't carry. I checked my work map. Section H, Plot 7, scattered 3 weeks prior. I pulled up the details on my phone. Olivia Castellano, age 68, retired opera singer, cause of death, complications from throat cancer. Service notes mentioned her career with regional opera companies, performances throughout the Southwest, a voice lost to disease years before her death. I stood slowly, staring at the plot. The singing continued, the same passage repeated in an endless loop, maybe 30 seconds of music, then silence, then the aria beginning again. I recorded it on my phone, held the device close to the soil, captured 2 full repetitions. When I played it back, there was nothing, just static and the distant hum of traffic. But I could still hear her, clear as morning rising from the earth. I finished my edging and moved to the next section, but the singing followed me, or rather, I could still hear it in my head, the melody looping endlessly like a song stuck in memory. That afternoon, I researched the aria, found it online through opera forums, Visidarte from Puccini's Tosca, a soprano's lament. I lived for art. I lived for love. The next morning, I arrived early. The singing started as soon as I approached section H. Same aria, same passage, same haunting clarity. I tried recording again. The playback was silent except for wind and bird song, but the voice continued in real time, rising from the soil every time I stood near plot 7. I began timing it. The aria played for 32 seconds, followed by 17 seconds of silence, then repeated over and over. The pattern never varied. I told no one. What would I say? That I was hearing phantom opera from a grave? That the dead were performing? Instead, I adjusted my schedule, started arriving at plot 7 every morning before beginning my rounds. I'd stand there for 10, 15 minutes, just listening. The voice never changed, never wavered, just the same perfect rendition, the same emotional delivery, the same loss embedded in every note. In August, I found myself humming the melody while I worked. I didn't know the words, didn't speak Italian, but the tune had embedded itself in my mind. Other staff started noticing. "You're in a good mood," my supervisor said one afternoon. "Just a song stuck in my head." What song? I couldn't explain, didn't try, but I kept returning to plot 7, kept listening, and slowly I began to understand. Olivia Castellano had lost her voice years before her death. Cancer had taken it piece by piece, stealing her identity, her purpose, her way of speaking to the world. The service notes mentioned she'd been silent for the last 2 years of her life. Couldn't sing, couldn't even hum. But here, in the earth, her voice was perfect, restored, eternal. On a humid morning in late August, I brought a small speaker and played Visidarte from my phone. The full recording, performed by a famous soprano. I set it beside plot 7 and let it play. The singing from the soil stopped. Complete silence for the 3-minute duration of the recording. I waited, holding my breath. When the recording ended, the earth remained quiet. No aria, no voice, just the morning wind and the rustle of cottonwood leaves. I felt my chest tighten. Had I silenced her, driven her away? I knelt beside the plot. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't mean to." The singing returned, but this time it was different. Not the same 32-second loop. A new passage, different notes. The aria had shifted, moved forward in the piece. I sat back, stunned. She'd been waiting for someone to hear the full song, to give her permission to continue. Over the next week, I played Visidarte every morning beside plot 7. Each time, the singing from the soil would stop, listen, then resume with a new section of the aria. We were moving through the piece together, me with my phone, her with the earth. By early September, we'd reached the end, the final sustained note, the soprano's last lament. I played it one morning, holding the speaker close to the soil. The voice from beneath joined in, perfect unison, 2 sopranos singing the same note, one alive through technology, one alive through something I couldn't name. When it ended, there was silence. I waited 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10. The singing didn't return. I visited Olivia's family a week later, found her daughter through the service records, called and asked if we could meet. We sat in a coffee shop downtown, and I tried to explain, told her about the singing, the aria, the way her mother's voice had returned in the earth. She cried quietly, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she didn't drink. She loved that aria, she said finally, sang it at her final performance before the cancer took her voice. She always said it was about her, about living for art and love and losing both. I'm sorry I couldn't record it. I tried, but I believe you. I don't need to hear it. She wiped her eyes. I'm glad she got to sing again, even if only you could hear her. We sat in silence for a while. Then she asked, Do you still hear her? No, not since we finished the aria. She smiled faintly. Maybe that's all she needed, to sing it one more time, to be heard. I've maintained Plot 7 with extra care since that conversation. Keep the roses blooming, the edges crisp, the memorial plaque polished. And sometimes, on humid mornings when the air is thick and the sun hasn't yet burned away the moisture, I stand there and listen. The singing never returned, the soil stays silent. But I swear I can feel something in the air, a resonance, a memory of sound that lingers like the final note of a song. 9 years I've worked here, and I thought I understood silence. The quiet of graves, the absence of voice, the permanence of ending. But some voices refuse to stay quiet. Some songs continue in the spaces we can't record, in the frequencies only grief can hear. I think about Olivia often, about the years she spent silent, voiceless, robbed of the thing that defined her, about the way art becomes identity, and losing it feels like losing yourself. And I'm grateful I was there to listen, to give her an audience of one, to let her finish what cancer interrupted. The earth remembers what we lose. It holds our voices, our songs, our final performances. And sometimes, if you're paying attention, if you're willing to kneel in the dirt and press your ear to the ground, you can hear them. One last aria, one last note, one last breath of art, before silence returns. I still hum Visi Darte while I work, still think about perfect pitch rising from impossible places. And every morning when I edge the beds near Section H, I pause at Plot 7 and listen to the quiet, because sometimes silence is just a rest between movements, and the song is never truly over. The watch stopped at 3:47, and no matter how many times I wound it, it always returned to that exact moment. My name is Faye Morrison, and I have worked as assistant director at Elmwood Memorial Cemetery in Indianapolis, Indiana, for 12 years. My responsibilities include coordinating services, managing burial logistics, and ensuring the grounds remain dignified. The work requires attention to detail and respect for both the living and the dead. I've learned to notice things others miss. I found the pocket watch in mid-September while inspecting the dogwood tree near Section M. We'd been having drainage issues after heavy rains, and I was checking for root damage when I saw something metallic partially exposed in the soil. I knelt down and dug carefully with my hand trowel. The object was buried about 8 inches deep, wedged between two thick roots. When I pulled it free, Mud and clay fell away to reveal tarnished silver. It was a pocket watch, antique, heavy, with an ornate case etched with scrollwork. I brushed the remaining dirt away and pressed the crown. The case opened with a soft click. The face was ivory colored, the numbers Roman numerals, the hands frozen at 347. I held it to my ear, no ticking. The mechanism was silent, stopped. I checked the burial records. The dogwood tree marked Plot M14, a scattering site from 15 years prior. I pulled up the file on my tablet. Harold Brennan, age 72, retired clockmaker, died in his sleep, March 2009. Service notes mentioned he'd been a master horologist, ran a small repair shop downtown for 47 years. No mention of a pocket watch, no items listed in the scattering inventory. I took the watch back to my office and cleaned it carefully with a soft cloth. The silver gleamed beneath the tarnish. On the inside of the case, I found an engraving: "To Harold, time well spent, Margaret." I researched Harold Brennan that afternoon, found his obituary, a brief mention in the local paper, survived by his son, Thomas. Wife Margaret had predeceased him by 6 years. I called Thomas that evening, explained who I was, described the watch I'd found. He went quiet for a long moment. "That's my father's watch. My mother gave it to him on their 40th anniversary. He wore it every day until he died." "Was it buried with him during the cremation?" "No, I kept it. It's in a display case in my living room right now." I looked down at the watch in my hand. "Mr. Brennan, I'm holding the watch. It has the engraving, 'To Harold, time well spent.'" "That's impossible. I'm looking at it right now. Could there have been two?" "No. It was custom made, one of a kind." He paused. "Where exactly did you find it?" "Buried beneath the dogwood tree where your father's ashes were scattered. I scattered those ashes myself. There was nothing in the urn except cremated remains." I had no response. We agreed I'd send him a photo. I hung up and photographed the watch from multiple angles: the case, the face, the engraving. He called back 10 minutes later. "That's the watch. Identical. Same scrollwork, same engraving, same hands stopped at 347. "What's significant about that time?" Another long pause. "That's the time the coroner estimated my father died, 3:47 a.m. I always thought it was oddly specific, but they said his wristwatch had stopped at that exact moment. Heart failure sometimes causes muscle contractions that can damage watches." I felt cold. "Your father was wearing a wristwatch when he died?" "Yes, a cheap digital, but the pocket watch was in the display case at his shop. It had been there for years. He never wore it after my mother died. Said he was saving the mechanism, didn't want to wind it down." I picked up the watch carefully, turned it over in my hands. "Mr. Brennan, would you like me to mail this to you?" I don't, I don't know. That doesn't make sense. How can the same watch be in two places?" "I don't know. Can you wind it? See if it works?" I pulled the crown gently, felt the mechanism's resistance. I wound it slowly, counting 10 full rotations. The watch began ticking immediately, a soft, precise rhythm. I watched the second hand sweep around the face. The time was correct, 7:32 p.m. The watch was functioning perfectly. It's working, I told him. Let it run. Call me tomorrow and tell me if it keeps time. I placed the watch on my desk and left it there overnight. I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking about two identical watches, about times stopping at the moment of death, about the impossibility of finding something buried beneath a tree when an identical object sat in a display case 15 miles away. The next morning, I checked the watch before I even started my coffee. It had stopped 3:47. I picked it up, held it to my ear. No ticking. The mechanism was frozen again. The hands returned to the exact position I'd found them in. I wound it again. 10 rotations. The watch resumed ticking. I carried it with me throughout the day, checking it every hour. It kept perfect time, never gained or lost a second. At 3:47 p.m., the watch stopped. I was standing in the middle of section M when it happened. I felt the ticking cease, a subtle absence of rhythm against my palm. I opened the case. 3:47 exactly. I wound it immediately. The watch started again, but I knew what would happen. For the next week, I repeated the experiment. Wound the watch, let it run, watched it stop at 3:47 a.m. or p.m. It didn't matter. The watch always returned to that moment. On the seventh day, I stopped winding it. I called Thomas again. The watch stops at 3:47 every time, a.m. and p.m. I can wind it, and it runs perfectly until that moment. Then it freezes. The watch in my house does the same thing. I felt my breath catch. What? It started 3 days ago. I noticed the hands had moved. I thought maybe vibration or temperature had shifted the mechanism, but when I checked the time, it was 3:47. I wound it out of curiosity. It ran for exactly 12 hours, then stopped again, same time. We were both silent, processing the impossibility. What do you want me to do with this watch? I asked finally. Keep it, bury it. I don't know. I can't explain it, and I don't want to. His voice was strained. My father spent his whole life fixing time, making sure clocks ran correctly, keeping schedules precise. Maybe he's still trying to fix something. Or maybe he's marking something. Like what? The moment everything stopped for him. Thomas didn't respond. After a long pause, he said quietly, let it stay where you found it, under the tree. If it wants to be there, let it be there. I reburied the watch that afternoon, dug a careful hole between the dogwood roots, placed the watch inside, covered it with soil. I said a quiet prayer, though I'm not religious. It just felt necessary. The watch stayed buried for 2 months. I checked periodically, brushing aside soil to confirm it was still there. It always was. Then, in November, after a heavy rain, I found it sitting on top of the soil, not partially exposed, completely clean, resting on the surface as if placed there deliberately. The time was 3:47. I don't rebury it anymore. I leave it where it appears, sometimes beneath the tree, sometimes on the memorial plaque, sometimes balanced on a low branch of the dogwood. It moves. I've accepted that. And every time I find it, I wind it once, 7 turns, just enough to let it tick for a few hours before it returns to 3:47. I think Harold Brennan is still working, still measuring time, still trying to repair something that broke at the moment of his death. Or maybe the watch is a marker, a reminder that some moments are so significant they stop time entirely. They create a boundary between before and after, a frozen instant that everything else revolves around. 12 years I've worked here, and I thought I understood endings. The moment of death, the finality of it, the way time moves on regardless. But some moments refuse to pass. Some hands stay frozen at 3:47, no matter how many times you wind them forward. I visit plot M14 every week now. Check on the watch, wind it gently, let it tick for a while before it inevitably stops. And I think about Harold, about a life spent fixing time and a death that froze it. The watch is still there, still stopping, still waiting. And I've learned that time doesn't heal everything. Sometimes it just marks the wound. The rings appeared after every rain, and they measured exactly 3.14 meters across. My name is Douglas Chen, and I have worked as lead keeper at Meadowlark Memorial Park in Boulder, Colorado for 21 years. My responsibilities include groundskeeping, environmental monitoring, and ensuring the scattering gardens maintain their natural beauty. The position requires scientific attention, soil composition, drainage patterns, plant health. I approach the work methodically, empirically, until the circles defied every logical explanation. They first appeared in late April, after a heavy spring rain. I was conducting my morning inspection of Section G when I noticed faint gray rings in the grass around plot G34. Circular patterns, maybe 3 meters in diameter, where the grass appeared slightly discolored. I knelt down and examined the affected area. The grass wasn't dead, just slightly paler, as if something in the soil was affecting chlorophyll production. I collected a soil sample and sent it to our contract lab for analysis. The results came back 3 days later. Elevated calcium and carbon levels, significantly elevated, concentrations far beyond what normal soil should contain. The composition was consistent with cremated remains, but the concentration made no sense. Cremains disperse naturally. They don't accumulate in geometric patterns. I checked the burial records. Plot G34 belonged to Robert Finch, age 67, scattered 6 months prior. The notes were brief: no service, family declined attendance, profession listed as mathematics teacher, retired. I measured the circle carefully with a surveyor's tape, 3.14 meters in diameter. The precision struck me immediately. 3.14 pi. I told myself it was coincidence. Natural phenomena sometimes create circular patterns, fairy rings, fungal growth, root expansion. The pi correlation was merely my mind finding patterns where none existed. But after the next rain, the circle was still there, darker now, more defined. I measured it again, 3.14 meters exactly. I collected more soil samples. The calcium and carbon levels had increased. The concentration was now 3 times normal. Dispersal rates. The cremains weren't dispersing. They were consolidating, organizing themselves. I began documenting everything, photographed the circle after each rain, measured its diameter, collected soil samples from multiple points along the circumference. The pattern never varied, always perfectly circular, always exactly 3.14 meters. By the third week, a second circle appeared, concentric with the first, approximately 2 meters in diameter, then a third, smaller still. The rings were forming a series, each one maintaining the same mathematical precision. I researched Robert Finch, found his obituary, a brief mention in the local paper. Retired mathematics teacher, 43 years at Boulder High School, specialized in geometry, no surviving family listed. I contacted the school, spoke with the current department head. He remembered Finch, brilliant teacher, obsessed with circles, taught a whole unit on pi every year, had students calculate it to 100 decimal places by hand. He paused, kind of sad, actually. Never married, never had kids, just lived for geometry and his students. Did he have any particular attachment to the number pi? Attachment? He was famous for it, called it the universe's most perfect number, said circles were the purest form in nature. Another pause. Why do you ask? I explained about the circles, the measurements, the impossible precision. The department head was quiet for a long moment. That's exactly the kind of thing Finch would do. Leave behind a mathematical proof, something elegant and unexplainable. After the fourth rain, there were 5 concentric circles. I measured each one, calculated the ratios. They were perfect, mathematically perfect. Each circle's diameter related to the others through geometric progressions. I stopped trying to explain it through soil chemistry or natural dispersion. The patterns were too precise, too deliberate. Instead, I started documenting them as data, created a spreadsheet tracking diameter, concentration, appearance timing. The circles appeared only after rainfall, never in dry conditions. Water was the catalyst. By June, there were 7 circles. The outermost measured exactly 3.14 meters. The innermost measured 0.314 meters. A perfect decimal relationship. I brought a colleague from the university's mathematics department to examine them, Professor Sarah Williams, a specialist in geometric patterns. She spent 2 hours measuring, photographing, analyzing. When she finished, she sat on the memorial bench and stared at the circles in silence. These are perfect, she said finally. Not approximate, perfect. The kind of precision you'd get from a compass and straight edge, not from natural processes. Can you explain them? No. Natural phenomena don't create nested circles with diameters based on pi. This is intentional, designed. By what? She looked at me. You tell me. You said these formed from scattered ashes? Yes, the cremated remains of a geometry teacher. She laughed, but it was strained. Then I'd say he's still teaching, still creating proofs, still showing us that mathematics exists beyond human consciousness. I visited Plot G34 after every rain that summer, watched the circles darken and multiply. By August, there were 10. By September, 12. I stopped measuring them. The precision was absolute, and documenting it felt redundant. Instead, I simply maintained the area, kept the grass trimmed around the circles, ensured the memorial plaque stayed visible. Students began visiting. Word had spread through the high school math department that their legendary teacher had left behind a final lesson. They'd come in small groups, photograph the circles, discuss the mathematical implications. One student, a young woman, maybe 17, approached me during a visit. Mr. Finch taught my older brother, she said. He used to say that pi was proof the universe had a sense of humor, an infinite, non repeating decimal hiding inside every circle. Did your brother stay in touch with him? No one did. He was kind of a loner, but my brother said Finch told them once that he wanted his ashes scattered in a circle, said he wanted to become part of the geometry he'd spent his life teaching. I looked at the concentric rings spreading across the grass. I think he got his wish. She smiled faintly. He always said mathematics was eternal, that numbers would outlast us all. She gestured at the circles. Guess he was right. The circles stopped expanding in late October. The outermost ring stabilized at exactly 12 meters, the innermost at 0.12 meters. 12 concentric circles, each one precisely related to the others through geometric ratios. I had the soil tested one final time. The calcium and carbon concentrations had reached equilibrium. The cremains had organized themselves completely, distributed across 12 perfect circles that would persist as long as the grass grew and the rain fell. I created a small informational plaque explaining the phenomenon, placed it near the memorial bench. The Finch circles, a geometric anomaly, included the measurements, the ratios, the mathematical precision. It became a minor pilgrimage site for math students and geometry enthusiasts. People visit, take measurements, photograph the patterns, discuss the impossibility, and every spring, after the first heavy rain, the circles reappear, slightly faded from winter, but still perfectly concentric, still exactly proportioned. I've maintained plot G34 for 8 months now, and I've stopped trying to explain it. Some things exist beyond our ability to rationalize them. Robert Finch spent his life teaching that mathematics was the language of the universe, that circles represented perfection, that pi was infinite and eternal, and in death he became what he taught, transformed his remains into a geometric proof that persists despite logic, despite natural law, despite every scientific principle I understand. 21 years I've worked here, and I thought I understood dispersion, the way ashes scatter randomly, mix with soil, become part of the earth without pattern or design. But some people refuse randomness. Some minds impose order even in death. The circles remain perfect, unexplainable, beautiful in their precision. And sometimes, on quiet mornings, when the rain has freshly revealed them, I stand at the edge and remember that mathematics outlasts flesh, that geometry persists, that some teachers never stop creating lessons. Plot G34 measures exactly 3.14 meters across, and it always will. The envelope was addressed to whoever found it, and inside was an apology for something that hadn't happened yet. My name is Iris Caldwell, and I have worked as garden supervisor at Cottonwood Memorial Park in Austin, Texas for 18 years. My responsibilities include maintaining the scattering gardens, coordinating memorial plantings, and ensuring the grounds reflect the dignity families expect. The work demands careful observation and respect for the space we tend. I found the letter on a Tuesday morning in early March while preparing the soil for spring plantings. I was working in Section C, turning compost into the garden beds, when my trowel struck something that wasn't dirt or root. I dug carefully and pulled out a sealed envelope, white, letter-sized, protected inside a plastic Ziploc bag. The plastic was dirty, but intact, suggesting it had been buried recently. I brushed the soil away and examined it. Written on the front in careful cursive, "To whoever finds this." I sat back on my heels, turning the envelope over. No postage, no return address, just that single line of instruction. I should have taken it to the office, should have logged it as a found item. Instead, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, the handwriting matching the envelope. The letter was dated 2 days before I found it. "Dear stranger," it began, "I'm sorry for what I'm about to do. I'm sorry Michael will find out this way. I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger." My hands started shaking. I kept reading. "By the time you read this, I'll be gone. They'll scatter my ashes in this garden, and Michael will come to visit, and he'll never know the truth. But you'll know. Someone should know." The letter continued for half a page, a confession, an apology to someone named Michael for a betrayal I didn't understand, an explanation of guilt that had become unbearable, a plea for forgiveness that could never be answered. It was signed Patricia Summers. I checked the burial records immediately. No Patricia Summers, no recent scatterings scheduled, no one by that name in our database. I called the office. "Do we have any services scheduled for this week? Someone named Patricia Summers?" "No, nothing scheduled until Saturday. A retirement ceremony for a Judge Henderson. Why?" "Just checking records. Thanks." I reread the letter. The date was clear, March 7th, 2 days ago. But there was no Patricia Summers in our system, no death certificate filed, no cremation scheduled, no family inquiries. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my office, wrote a note to check daily for any Summers family inquiries. Then I returned to my work, trying to forget the words I'd read. 3 days later, a woman called, asking about scattering arrangements. "I need to schedule a service for my sister," she said, her voice strained. "Patricia Summers, she passed away yesterday." I felt my chest tighten. "I'm very sorry for your loss. Can I ask, what was the date of death?" "March 9th, yesterday. It was sudden, heart failure." "March 9th, 2 days after the letter was dated, 4 days after it was written." "And you'd like to scatter her ashes here?" "Yes. Patricia loved gardens. We used to visit Cottonwood when we were younger. Section C was her favorite. Is that available?" I looked out my window at Section C, at the exact spot where I'd found the letter. "Yes," I said quietly, "that's available." We scheduled the service for the following week. I didn't mention the letter, didn't ask about Michael. I just processed the paperwork and tried to ignore the weight settling in my stomach. The night before the service, I reread the letter. The confession was about an affair, about betraying Michael, her husband, I assumed, with someone whose name she didn't mention, about guilt that had consumed her for years. I couldn't tell him while I was alive, she'd written, but maybe someone finding this will know that I was sorry, that I carried this every day, that it killed me slowly until my heart finally gave out. Her heart gave out, just like the death certificate stated. The service was small. Patricia's sister, her husband Michael, and maybe a dozen other people. I watched from a distance as they gathered around the spot where I'd found the letter. Michael was in his 60s, gray-haired, his face carved with grief. He held an urn carefully, his hands trembling. When they scattered the ashes, he knelt down and pressed his palm to the soil. "I love you," he whispered. "I always have. I always will." I felt tears burn my eyes. He didn't know. Patricia's sister didn't know. No one knew except me, and the letter buried 2 inches beneath where they now stood. After the service ended, Patricia's sister approached me. "Thank you for accommodating us on short notice." "Of course, I'm very sorry for your loss." She looked back at the plot. She was carrying so much guilt the last few years, wouldn't talk about it, just withdrew into herself. She paused. The doctor said the stress contributed to her heart condition, that emotional trauma can manifest physically. "I'm sorry. I just wish she'd told someone, wish she had let it out instead of letting it destroy her." I thought about the letter, about how she had told someone, had written it down and buried it where it would eventually be found. "Maybe she found a way," I said quietly. That night, I made a decision. I took the letter from my office, placed it back in its plastic bag, and returned to Section C. I buried it again. Same spot, same depth. 2 days later, I found it sitting on top of the soil. I didn't remember the exact location, hadn't marked it, but there it was, the plastic bag resting on the surface, as if placed there deliberately. I reburied it, covered it with 6 inches of soil, tamped it down firmly. The next morning, it was back, sitting on Patricia's memorial plaque. I stopped trying to bury it after that. Instead, I placed it in a sealed box in my office, locked in my desk drawer. A week later, Michael returned to the garden. I saw him walking slowly toward Section C, carrying a small bouquet of yellow roses. I approached carefully. "Mr. Summers, can I help you with anything?" He looked up, startled. "Oh, no, thank you. I just wanted to visit. Bring her flowers. She has a beautiful spot." She always loved gardens. He placed the roses on the ground. "We had a good marriage, 42 years. Not perfect, but good." He paused. "I just wish I'd told her more often how much I loved her, how much I forgave her." I went very still. Forgave her? For her mistakes, for the things she thought I didn't know about. He looked at me, his eyes wet. "I knew about the affair, knew for years. I forgave her long before she died, but she never believed me, never let herself accept it." I felt my throat tighten. "Did you tell her?" "Many times, but she couldn't hear it. The guilt was too loud." He touched the memorial plaque gently. "I just hope she knows now, wherever she is, I hope she finally believes she was forgiven. I thought about the letter, about Patricia's apology, about the way some guilt persists even after confession. I think she knows, I said. Michael stayed for an hour. When he left, I returned to my office and opened my desk drawer. The letter was gone. I searched the entire office, checked the locked drawer, the file cabinets, under the desk. Nothing. I walked back to Section C. The letter was there, placed carefully on the memorial plaque, the plastic bag sealed. But the contents had changed. The confession was gone. In its place, a single line, in the same handwriting, "Thank you for telling him." But I hadn't told him. He already knew, had known for years. I picked up the letter carefully. The paper felt different, lighter, as if something heavy had been removed from it. I buried it one final time, deep, 12 inches down, directly beneath the memorial plaque where Patricia's ashes rested. It never resurfaced. I visit Section C every week during my rounds. Check the soil, maintain the flowers, keep the area pristine, and sometimes, when I'm working nearby, I swear I can feel something lighter in the air. Something released, something that had been carried too long and finally set down. 18 years I've worked here, and I thought I understood burial. You scatter the ashes, mark the spot, let the dead rest. But some things need to be confessed before they can be released. Some apologies need to be written even if they're never directly received. Patricia found her way to forgiveness. Not through the letter, through the love that already existed, waiting for her to finally accept it. The letter stays buried, the guilt dissolved, the garden grows, and somewhere beneath Section C, an apology, transformed into gratitude. I think about forgiveness often now, about the weight of secrets, about how love persists even when we can't believe we deserve it. The soil remembers what we bury, but it also knows when to let things go. And sometimes that's the greatest mercy of all. The handprint was too deep to be recent, and every time I removed it, it came back deeper. My name is Ben Kowalski, and I have worked as a seasonal groundskeeper at Harmony Gardens Memorial Park in Olympia, Washington, for 6 years. The position is temporary, April through October, maintaining the scattering gardens during growing season. The work is simple, physical. You plant, you weed, you water. You don't ask questions about what you find in the soil. I found the handprint in late May while preparing the daylily beds in Section E. I was turning the soil, mixing in fresh compost, when I noticed something odd in the dirt. A depression, perfectly shaped, small. I knelt down and examined it. A child's handprint, pressed deep into hardened clay. The fingers were splayed, the palm clearly defined. It looked deliberate, like someone had pushed their hand into wet clay and let it dry, but the clay was hard, old. This wasn't fresh. I checked the plot marker, Section E, Plot 19. The memorial plaque read, Sarah Whitmore, beloved teacher, 1951 to 2019, forever with her angels. I didn't know the story, didn't know if she'd had children. The work order just said to prepare the bed for daylilies, so I kept working. I tried to break up the clay handprint with my trowel. intending to mix it back into the soil. The clay was impossibly hard. I chipped at it, used the edge of my spade, finally managed to break it into chunks. I mixed the pieces into the compost and spread fresh topsoil over the area. Planted the daylilies in neat rows. The bed looked perfect, clean, professional. The next morning, the handprint was back. Same location, same size, but deeper now. The impression had to be 3 inches into the soil. The clay hardened again as if it had been there for months. I stared at it for a long time. I'd removed it completely, mixed it into compost, buried it under 6 inches of new soil and mulch. This wasn't possible. I broke it up again. This time, I removed all the clay pieces, threw them in the waste bin behind the maintenance shed, raked the area smooth, double-checked that nothing remained. By the third morning, I knew what I'd find before I even looked. The handprint was back, deeper still. Now it was 4 inches into the ground. The clay so hard I couldn't break it with hand tools. I called my supervisor. We have a problem in Section E. There's something in the soil I can't remove. He came out to inspect, stared at the handprint for a full minute. What the hell is that? A handprint, child-sized. I've removed it twice, but it keeps coming back deeper. That doesn't make sense. I know. He knelt down and tried to pry the clay out. It wouldn't budge. This is solid, like it's been fired in a kiln. It wasn't there when I started this bed 5 days ago. He looked at me. You sure? Positive. I would have noticed. We researched Sarah Whitmore that afternoon, found her obituary in the local paper. Retired kindergarten teacher, 43 years at Evergreen Elementary, died from complications of pneumonia. The obituary mentioned she'd scattered her late son's ashes at Harmony Gardens years prior. Sarah is survived by her daughter Emily and predeceased by her son Jacob, who passed away in 2006. Her son is buried here? I asked my supervisor. Scattered, but I'd have to check the old records. That was before our digital system. He found the file 2 hours later. Jacob Whitmore, age 6, died from leukemia. Ashes scattered in Section E, Plot 19, the same plot where Sarah's ashes now rested, the same plot where the handprint kept appearing. Mother and son in the same spot, my supervisor said quietly. That's why she chose it. I thought about the handprint, about a 6-year-old boy, about clay that hardened impossibly deep. What do we do? I asked. Leave it. Don't touch it again. But the daylilies. Plant around it. I returned to Section E that afternoon and stared at the handprint. It seemed smaller in context now. A child's hand. Small fingers. A palm barely 3 inches wide. I planted the daylilies in a circle around it. Left the handprint exposed in the center of the bed. It looked intentional, like a memorial within a memorial. The next morning, the handprint was deeper, 6 inches now. The clay had darkened, almost black. I stopped trying to understand, stopped questioning the logistics. I just maintained the bed, watered the lilies, kept the area clean, but I started noticing other things. Toys appearing near the handprint, small plastic cars, a worn teddy bear, crayons, items that hadn't been there during my morning rounds. I asked the office staff if families had visited. They checked the sign-in log. No visitors recorded. I set up a small wildlife camera, thinking maybe animals were moving objects around. The footage showed nothing. Empty garden, still nights, no movement. But the toys kept appearing. By late June, there was a collection: a toy truck, 3 crayons, red, blue, yellow, a small wooden block with the letter J carved into it, a plastic dinosaur, and the handprint kept growing deeper: 8 inches, 10 inches, 12. I began measuring it weekly, documented the depth, photographed the progression. The clay was expanding downward like roots, like something reaching. In July, Sarah's daughter visited. I saw her walking toward Section E, carrying a bouquet of daisies and a worn children's book. I approached carefully. "Ma'am, I'm Ben, one of the groundskeepers. I wanted to ask you about something." She smiled faintly. "Is everything okay? The plot looks beautiful." "Thank you. I wanted to ask, did your brother like to play with clay?" Her expression shifted. "Jacob? Yes, he loved it. Spent hours making things with modeling clay. Why?" I gestured toward the handprint. "We found this in the soil. It won't go away." She walked over slowly, stared down at it. Her hand went to her mouth. "That's his hand," she whispered. "I recognize it. He used to press his hand into everything: clay, paint, wet sand." She knelt down. "My mother kept a clay impression he made in preschool. She had it on her mantle until she died." "Did she bury it with her ashes?" "No, I have it at home." She looked up at me. "This is different, deeper, like he's—" She stopped. "Like he's reaching up?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. She placed the children's book beside the handprint. The cover was faded, the pages worn from reading. She used to read this to him every night, even when he was too sick to respond. I watched her trace the outline of the handprint with her finger. "Do you want me to cover it?" "No, leave it, please." She visited every week after that, always brought something small: a toy, a book, a drawing she'd made, placed them around the handprint like offerings, and the handprint kept growing. By August, it was 18 inches deep. The clay had become a column, reaching down into the earth like a monument. The surface handprint was still visible, still perfectly formed, but below it the clay extended deeper than I could measure. I stopped trying to document it, stopped questioning, just maintained the area, respected the space, let the impossible exist. One morning in September, I arrived to find the handprint had changed. It was no longer alone. A second handprint had appeared beside it, larger, adult-sized, the fingers overlapping the child's hand, as if holding it, Sarah's hand. I sat on the memorial bench and cried. I'm not sure why. Maybe because it was beautiful. Maybe because it was impossible. Maybe because I understood what I was seeing: a mother reaching down, a child reaching up, 2 hands finally touching after years of separation. The handprints remain, both of them, hardened clay that defies explanation, that grows deeper with each passing week. I've stopped maintaining that specific bed, stopped planting around them. Now I just clear the weeds, keep the area visible, let the handprints exist as they need to. Families visit now, word spread about the memorial. People come to see the impossible. to witness two hands reaching for each other across death. And sometimes, on quiet mornings, I swear the clay feels warm. 6 years I've worked here seasonally, and I thought I understood grief. You bury it, plant flowers over it, let time smooth everything over. But some grief refuses to be buried. Some love reaches through soil and clay and impossibility. Sarah and Jacob are together now, not scattered, not separate, together in a way that defies every rule of death and dispersion. I think about them often, about a mother who waited years to be reunited, about a child who kept reaching up until she finally reached down. The handprints stay deep, permanent, warm beneath the surface. And I've learned that some memorials create themselves, that some hands never let go, even when the earth tries to separate them. The sound matched the frequency of a pacemaker, and it never stopped beating. My name is Celeste Park, and I have worked as night attendant at Riverside Memorial Gardens in Sacramento, California for 7 years. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 5 nights a week. The work is solitary, quiet, securing the grounds, monitoring security systems, ensuring the cemetery remains undisturbed. You learn to appreciate silence, to find comfort in the stillness. Until the hum started, I first heard it in early August during my 2 a.m. rounds. I was walking through the southeast corner of the scattering garden when I noticed a low mechanical sound, steady, rhythmic, like a small motor running underground. I stopped walking. The hum continued. I traced it to section H, plot 27, where it seemed to emanate directly from the soil. I knelt down and pressed my ear to the ground. The sound was clearer now, a mechanical pulse, 70 beats per minute, perfectly regular. I checked for irrigation issues, electrical boxes, underground utilities. Nothing. The scattering garden had no mechanical systems, no power lines, no water pumps. But the hum persisted. I noted it in my shift report. Unusual mechanical sound in section H. Possible equipment malfunction. Recommend daytime investigation. The day crew found nothing. No equipment. No explanation. They suggested I'd heard irrigation from a neighboring property or traffic from the highway, but the next night, the hum was back. Same location, same rhythm, 70 beats per minute. I started documenting it, recorded it on my phone, though playback produced only static, timed the intervals, measured the approximate frequency. Everything pointed to something mechanical, something electrical, but there was no source. I researched the plot. Section H, Plot 27, belonged to Dr. Marcus Chen, age 74, scattered 2 months prior. The service notes were sparse. Small ceremony, family only. Profession listed as cardiac surgeon. Cardiac surgeon. I looked at my notes, 70 beats per minute, the average resting heart rate, the rhythm of a healthy heart, or a pacemaker. I called the funeral home that handled Dr. Chen's cremation, asked if there had been any medical devices with the body. Yes, the director confirmed. A pacemaker. We removed it before cremation. Standard procedure. They're explosive at high temperatures. What did you do with it? Disposed of it properly. Medical waste protocol. And you're certain it was removed? Positive. I handled it myself. But the hum continued. Every night at 2 a.m., when I walked the southeast corner, the mechanical pulse was there, 70 beats per minute, steady, eternal. I began timing my rounds to avoid Section H, took alternate paths, checked that area during daylight visits before my shift. The hum only occurred at night, only during the quiet hours when the cemetery was empty and still. By September, I couldn't avoid it anymore. The hum had become part of my routine, part of the soundscape I worked within. I'd walk past Section H and hear it resume, walk away and hear it fade. It never stopped me, never followed, just pulsed in that one spot, marking time. One night, I decided to say I brought a folding chair and positioned myself 10 feet from plot 27. I wanted to observe, to understand. I sat in the darkness and listened. The hum was constant, mechanical, precise, 70 beats per minute for hours, no variation, no interruption. At 4 a.m., I stood and approached the plot. The moment I got within 5 feet, the hum stopped. Complete silence, just the wind in the oak trees and the distant sound of traffic. I stepped back. The hum resumed immediately. I tested it repeatedly. 5 feet away, silence. 6 feet away, the hum returned. Dr. Chen's pacemaker was proximity sensitive. It stopped when I was close, continued when I maintained distance, as if it didn't want to disturb me, as if it was being polite. I started talking to it. Dr. Chen, I said quietly one night, I'm Celeste. I'm the night attendant here. I hear your pacemaker. I know you're still here. The hum continued, steady, unchanging. I won't try to stop it. I just wanted you to know someone hears it. Someone knows. The rhythm didn't change, but something in the air felt different. Acknowledged. I began checking on plot 27 every night. A brief visit during my rounds. I'd stand 6 feet away, listen to the mechanical pulse, confirm it was still there. Still going strong, I'd say. 70 beats per minute, healthy rhythm. It became routine, comforting even. The cemetery was full of silence and stillness. But Section H had a heartbeat, had persistence, had a reminder that something continued. In October, Dr. Chen's widow visited during one of my shifts. She'd forgotten something during her afternoon visit and returned after hours. I saw her car in the parking lot and went to investigate. She was standing at plot 27, her hand pressed to the memorial plaque. Ma'am, the cemetery is closed. Can I help you with something? She looked up, startled. I'm sorry, I needed to visit him. I forgot to leave these. She held up a small bouquet of white carnations. That's fine. Take your time. She placed the flowers on the plaque. This is going to sound strange, but do you ever hear anything when you're here at night, near this spot? I hesitated. What kind of sound? A hum, mechanical, like his pacemaker. She laughed weakly. I know that's impossible. They removed it. But I swear sometimes I feel it, like his heart is still beating. I looked at her for a long moment. I hear it too. Her eyes widened. You do? Every night, 70 beats per minute, right here. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. I thought I was losing my mind. You're not. It's real. I've documented it. We sat on the memorial bench together. I explained what I'd observed, the consistency, the proximity sensitivity, the way it only occurred at night. He saved so many hearts, she said quietly, performed thousands of surgeries, implanted hundreds of pacemakers. He always said the heart was just a pump, but he treated it like it was sacred. She looked at the plot. Maybe his heart isn't ready to stop. Or maybe he's still working, still keeping rhythm. She smiled through her tears. That sounds like Marcus, always on call, always monitoring. She visited several times after that, always at night, always during my shift. We'd sit together and listen to the hum. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we just let the mechanical pulse fill the silence. The hum never changed, never failed. 70 beats per minute, every night, constant as time itself. By December, other night staff started noticing. The security guard mentioned hearing something mechanical in the southeast corner. The cleaning crew asked if we'd installed new equipment. I told them it was irrigation, a pump that ran on a timer. They accepted the explanation and moved on, but I knew the truth. Dr. Marcus Chen's heart was still beating, still maintaining its rhythm, still fulfilling its purpose. I've worked nights here for 7 years, and I've learned that darkness changes sound, makes it carry differently, makes you hear things others miss. But this isn't imagination, isn't tricks of acoustics or ambient noise. This is a pacemaker that refuses to stop, a heart that continues its work even after cremation, even after scattering, even after every logical reason for its persistence has been removed. I visit Section H every night during my rounds. Stand 6 feet away. Listen to the mechanical pulse that marks time in a place designed for timelessness. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I think about purpose, about the way some things refuse to stop working, about hearts that beat beyond the body, beyond death, beyond understanding. Dr. Chen's pacemaker hums at 70 beats per minute, always has, always will, and I've learned to work around it, to respect its rhythm, to let it continue its vigil, because some hearts never stop, some purposes persist, some beats echo long after the body falls silent. The cemetery is full of endings, but Section H has a beginning that never stops repeating, 70 beats per minute, every night, forever. And I've learned that's not haunting, that's dedication. That's a heart that loved its work so much it refused to retire. I check on it every night, make sure it's still there, still beating, still keeping time. And when I stand 6 feet away in the darkness, listening to that steady mechanical pulse, I think about the thousands of hearts Dr. Chen saved, and I'm grateful that at least one, his own, still refuses to quit. The hum continues, the rhythm persists, the heart beats on, and I've learned to find comfort in the sound, because in a place defined by silence, sometimes you need a heartbeat to remind you that love and purpose outlast everything, even death. The figure appeared every night at 2:13 a.m., but it cast no shadow despite standing in floodlight. My name is Hector Ruiz, and I have worked as security guard at Maplewood Memorial Cemetery in Burlington, Vermont for 14 years. My job is monitoring the grounds overnight, reviewing camera feeds, ensuring the property remains secure. The work is routine, predictable. You watch screens, you make rounds, you document anything unusual. I started documenting the figure in late September. It appeared first on camera 7, which covers the northeast section of the scattering garden. The timestamp showed 2:13 a.m. A person-shaped silhouette standing motionless at plot 22C, directly beneath the floodlight. I switched to live view. The figure was still there, human-shaped, average height, completely still. I couldn't make out features. The floodlight created too much backlight, but the posture suggested someone standing in contemplation. I ran a quick check of the entry logs. No vehicles had entered since 9 p.m. The pedestrian gates were locked. Whoever this was, they'd either been hiding on the grounds since closing or had found a way to bypass security. I radioed my partner, got a possible trespasser in the northeast garden. Camera 7, I'm going to check it out. Copy that. Be careful. I grabbed my flashlight and walked to the northeast section. The floodlights illuminated the pathways clearly. From my position, I could see plot 22C. No one was there. I approached carefully, checking behind memorials and benches. The area was empty. No footprints in the dew-wet grass. No signs of disturbance. I radioed back. False alarm. Must have been a deer or shadow. But when I returned to the security office and reviewed the footage, the figure was still there, standing in the exact position I'd just checked, 2:13 a.m., motionless. I rewound the footage. The figure appeared suddenly, at 2:13 precisely. No gradual approach, no movement into frame, just appeared. And something else I hadn't noticed during the live view, the figure cast no shadow. The floodlight was directly above it, bright enough to create sharp shadows from every memorial bench, every plant, every stone marker, but the figure, standing directly beneath the light, produced no shadow at all. I checked the next night. 2:13 a.m. The figure appeared, same spot, same posture, same absence of shadow. I documented it, screenshot the timestamp, noted the camera number, flagged it for review. The figure appeared for 6 consecutive nights. Always at 2:13 a.m., always at plot 22C, always shadowless. On the 7th night, I decided to investigate in person at the exact moment it appeared. I positioned myself 30 feet from plot 22C at 2:10 a.m., stood in the darkness with my flashlight ready, watching the spot. At 2:13 exactly, I felt the air change, a subtle shift in temperature, the kind of cold that settles when you're being watched. I turned on my flashlight and swept it across plot 22C. Nothing. Empty grass, the memorial plaque reflecting light. No figure, but on camera 7, reviewing the footage later, the figure was there, standing exactly where I'd been looking, present in the recording, but invisible to my eyes. I researched plot 22C during my break. The memorial belonged to Thomas Hartley, age 61, scattered 4 months prior. Profession, photographer, specialized in shadow work and light manipulation. Shadow work. I read his obituary, found mentions of his artistic philosophy, that shadows revealed truth, that light without shadow was incomplete, that the absence of darkness made light meaningless. His final gallery show had been titled The Shadowless, exploring subjects without cast shadows, creating impossible lighting scenarios through careful manipulation. And now, a figure appeared at his memorial every night, a figure that existed in recorded light but produced no shadow. I began checking the footage every night at 2:13. The figure never varied, never moved, just stood there, a shadowless presence marking time. In October, I decided to examine the area more carefully. I visited Plot 22C during daylight, before my shift started. The soil looked recently disturbed, not dug up, just altered. There were patterns in the dirt, deliberate lines and curves, like someone had been drawing. I knelt down and looked closer. The patterns formed the outline of an aperture, a camera lens aperture, the geometric shape photographers use to control light. I photographed it and sent the image to a photography forum. Someone identified it immediately. F-stop diagram looks like f/2.8, wide aperture, low light setting. Low light, like the conditions at 2:13 a.m. I returned that night and waited at plot 22C with a camera. My own camera, not the security feed. I wanted to see if I could capture what the surveillance system was recording. At 2:13 a.m., the temperature dropped. I felt the presence but saw nothing. I took a photograph anyway, pointing the camera at the empty space where the surveillance feed showed the figure. When I reviewed the image, my hands started shaking. The figure was there, in my photograph. A person-shaped silhouette, edges slightly blurred, standing exactly where I'd aimed the camera, but still no shadow. The floodlight created harsh shadows from every object in frame except the figure itself. I took 6 more photographs. The figure appeared in each one, always slightly different. The blur varied, the edges shifted, the position changed by inches, as if the figure was moving, but only between frames, only in captured moments, not in real time. I printed the photographs and brought them to Thomas Hartley's daughter, found her contact information through the funeral home, called and asked if we could meet. We sat in a coffee shop downtown. I showed her the photographs. She stared at them for a long time, tears streaming down her face. "This is his work," she whispered. "This is exactly what he was trying to create. A presence without shadow, a figure that exists only in captured light. But I didn't create these. I just photographed what was there. You photographed what he became." She touched one of the images gently. "My father believed that photographers don't die, that we exist in every image we've captured, every moment of light we've frozen. He said shadows were proof of presence, but he wanted to prove you could exist without them, that light itself could hold you. Is he, is he still there at his memorial?" "I think so. I think he found a way to become what he always photographed, a shadowless presence, existing in frames and recordings, but not in continuous time." I asked if she wanted to visit, to see him. She declined. "I've seen him enough in photographs. That's how he wanted to be remembered, in captured moments, in frozen light." She returned the photographs to me. "Keep them. Document him. He'd appreciate that." The figure still appears every night. 2:13 a.m. Plot 22C Shadowless. I've stopped trying to see it with my eyes. Instead, I photograph it, document its presence through captured light, the way Thomas Hartley spent his life documenting others. The photographs vary. Sometimes the figure faces the camera. Sometimes it turns away. Sometimes it seems to be adjusting something, a camera perhaps. Working even in death, I've created a gallery of sorts. Photographs from each night, organized by date. The collection shows subtle changes. The figure moves, shifts, continues whatever work it began. And I've learned something about observation, about the difference between seeing and capturing, about how some things exist only in the space between moments. Thomas Hartley was a photographer who specialized in shadows. In death, he became a subject without one, a presence that exists only in recorded light, only in captured frames, only in the evidence left behind. 14 years I've worked here, watching screens and walking rounds. I thought I understood surveillance. Cameras capture what's there. They document reality. But Thomas Hartley taught me that cameras capture something else. They capture light, and light can hold presence even when shadow fails. The figure appears every night. I photograph it every night. And slowly, frame by frame, I'm documenting something impossible. A photographer who refused to stop working, who found a way to exist in the medium he loved, who became the subject of an endless, shadowless gallery. Plot 22C stays undisturbed. The aperture pattern in the soil remains. And at 2:13 a.m., when the light is right and the shadows are wrong, Thomas Hartley continues his work. I've learned to appreciate it, to see it as art rather than anomaly, because some artists never stop creating. Some work continues in the spaces between frames, and some presences refuse to be limited by shadow, by body, by the rules of light we take for granted. I check camera 7 every night, take my photograph, add it to the gallery, and I think about how death doesn't end creative work, how some artists find ways to persist in their medium, how light remembers what darkness forgets. The figure never waves, never acknowledges me, just stands there, shadowless and still, existing in captured moments. And that's exactly how a photographer would choose to haunt the world. Not in flesh, in frames, in frozen light, in the eternal now of a photograph that never fades. 2:13 a.m. Every night, forever. The needle spun endlessly counterclockwise until the day it finally found north. My name is Vera Sullivan, and I have worked as head gardener at Seaview Memorial Gardens in Newport, Rhode Island for 26 years. My responsibilities include maintaining the memorial plantings, preserving the historic magnolia trees, and ensuring the coastal gardens withstand salt air and winter storms. The work connects you to the earth, to seasons, to the slow persistence of growing things. I found this compass in early November while clearing leaf litter from the magnolia roots in Section B. The trees are old, planted when the cemetery was established in 1923. Their root systems run deep, and every autumn I clear the debris that accumulates around their bases. I was raking when I felt something solid beneath the leaves. I knelt down and brushed the mulch aside, revealing a brass compass partially buried in the soil. I pulled it free carefully. The brass was tarnished but intact, the glass face clouded with age. I opened it, expecting the needle to be frozen or broken. It was spinning, counterclockwise, continuously. The needle made complete rotations every few seconds, never settling, never stopping. I held it still. The spinning continued. I tapped it gently. No change. The needle rotated endlessly, as if searching for something it couldn't find. I checked the plot marker, Section B, Plot 8. The memorial plaque read, Captain James Morrison, 1947 to 2021, fair winds and following seas. A naval captain. I felt the weight of the compass in my hand and understood immediately what I'd found. I researched Captain Morrison that afternoon, found his obituary in the Newport Daily News. 38 years naval service, multiple deployments, retired as commander of a destroyer, died from complications of heart disease. The obituary mentioned he'd gone down with his ship during a storm in 2007. The vessel had been recovered, but Captain Morrison's body was trapped in the wreckage for 3 days before rescue teams could extract him. He survived, but never fully recovered. James never lost his sense of direction. His widow was quoted saying, even after the accident, he always knew which way was north, could point to it without thinking. It was like he had a compass in his chest. I turned the brass compass over in my hands, engraved on the back, J.M. Find your way home. I called Mrs. Morrison the next day, explained who I was, described the compass I'd found. She went very quiet. That's James's compass. I thought I'd buried it with something else. I must have dropped it during the scattering. It's spinning. The needle won't stop. What do you mean spinning? Counterclockwise, continuously. It won't settle on north. Long silence. Then softly, James was disoriented after the accident. For months, he'd wake up not knowing which direction he was facing. It terrified him. A navigator who couldn't find north. She paused. Maybe the compass is still searching. Would you like me to mail it to you? No, leave it where you found it. He always said compasses belong in the field, not in display cases. If it's searching, let it search. I reburied the compass that afternoon, placed it carefully between the magnolia roots, covered it with soil and mulch, left it to continue its endless rotation. But the next morning, it was back, sitting on the top of the mulch, brass gleaming in the weak November sun, the needle still spinning. I picked it up. The rotation was slightly slower now, still counterclockwise, but the speed had decreased, as if the compass was winding down or focusing. I left it on the memorial plaque, checked it every day during my rounds. The spinning continued, but kept slowing. One rotation every 5 seconds, then every 10, then every 30. By late November, the compass was barely moving. The needle crawled counterclockwise, taking almost a minute to complete a full rotation. The first snow came in early December. I found the compass buried in under 3 inches of powder. I brushed the snow away and checked it. The needle had stopped, completely still, pointing northwest, not north, northwest. I took a bearing with my phone's GPS compass. The needle pointed at 295 degrees. exactly northwest. Unwavering, I wondered what lay in that direction, what the compass had finally found after weeks of searching. I researched it that night. 295 degrees from Newport, Rhode Island. I traced the line across a map. It passed over Long Island Sound, across Connecticut, across New York, and eventually, 200 miles away, it crossed over the Atlantic Ocean, the ocean where Captain Morrison's ship had gone down in 2007. I returned to the compass every day that winter. The needle never moved from 295 degrees, always pointing toward the ocean, always holding that exact bearing. In February, Mrs. Morrison visited. She'd called ahead, said she wanted to see where I'd found the compass. We walked to Section B together, our boots crunching through frozen snow. I showed her the compass, still pointing northwest, still unwavering. She picked it up carefully, held it in both hands. He's pointing home. Home? The ship. Where he went down. He always said that's where he belonged, in the water, not on land. She turned the compass slowly, but the needle stayed fixed. He finally found his bearing. After searching for weeks, after searching for 14 years, since the accident, since he lost his sense of direction. She looked at me. You gave him time. Let him find it again. She placed the compass back on the memorial plaque. We stood together in the cold, watching the needle hold steady. Will you keep checking on it? She asked. Of course. And if it starts spinning again, I'll let it search as long as it needs. She smiled faintly. Thank you. James would appreciate that. A navigator needs time to plot his course. The compass stayed fixed on 295 degrees through winter, through spring, through summer, never wavering, never spinning, just holding that one bearing with absolute precision. In October, almost a year after I'd found it, the needle moved, not spinning, rotating slowly, deliberately. It shifted from northwest to north, 295 degrees to 360 degrees, true north, and it stopped there. I called Mrs. Morrison. The compass moved. It's pointing north now. Long pause. North, true north, 360 degrees, exact. I heard her voice break. He found his way back. He finished the journey. What do you mean? James always said a navigator's job was to bring the ship home, to find north and follow it. He spent 14 years lost at sea, then years searching for his bearing, and now she couldn't continue. Now he's home, I finished quietly. Yes, now he's home. The compass remains at plot 8. I moved it to a small weatherproof case mounted on the memorial plaque. The glass is clear now, the brass polished. The needle points true north, steady and sure. Visitors sometimes stop and check it. Use it to orient themselves in the garden. Compare it to their phone's GPS. It's always accurate, always precise, always pointing north. 26 years I've worked here, maintaining gardens and tending trees, and learning the slow rhythms of growth and decay. I thought I understood direction. You plant in rows, you follow paths, you know where you're going. But Captain Morrison taught me that direction to Jarvis isn't just about knowing where north is. It's about finding it after you've been lost, about searching until the spinning stops, about the moment when chaos finally settles into clarity. I think about him often, about a navigator who lost his way and spent years searching for it, about a compass that spun endlessly until it found what it was looking for. And I'm grateful I let it search, that I didn't force it to settle, that I gave it time to complete its journey. The compass points north now, true north, permanent and sure. And beneath the magnolia trees in Section B, a captain finally knows which way is home. I check it every morning during my rounds. The needle never wavers, never spins, just holds steady, pointing north with the certainty of someone who's traveled every direction and finally found the one that matters. Fair winds and following seas, Captain Morrison, you found your bearing, you plotted your course, you made it home, and your compass keeps pointing the way for all of us still searching. True north, always, forever, steady as the stars you used to navigate by, steady as the love that waited for you to find your way back. The magnolia trees bloom every spring. The compass points north every morning, and in Section B, a navigator who rests in perfect orientation. Finally, completely home.